So this tutorial we're going to go through the EXS24 and just show you how to load in some samples, how to utilize those samples within EXS, and also to send them to different outputs, so you can put effects and processing on individual groups rather than just the whole instrument together. So to start, we're going to open up an EXS24, just create a new software instrument like I've done, and come to input, EXS24. We're going to use the multi-output, which is 5 stereo outputs and 6 monos. This is so we can split the samples up into different channels, and we can put different processing effects, etc. onto each individual channel. So once you've opened EXS, it opens up like this. By default, there's no samples loaded, it's just a sine wave. If you play, it's just a sine wave. And looking at it, it is pretty straightforward. You've got, for example, your volume, some filters with cutoff and resonance, etc. You've also got some fine tuning and some transposing with glider, etc. You've got your LFOs and you've got your envelopes. Pretty straightforward sampler, pretty standard stuff. So what we need to do is we need to start adding in our samples. So to do that, we need to go into the edit mode, which is located just around here. If we click on that, the instrument editor will come up and it looks like this. Now, what we've got here is a few different sample options and edit options that we can do here, and these are the ones that load up by default. You can load more up. If you go to view, there's a few here. We can come to these ones a bit later on. Let's load them up so you can see them. So these are the ones that we're going to use today, really. Let's maybe just load up a couple more. Yeah, let's load them up. Right, and we'll go through as many as we can. So what we need to do is we need to start loading in zones, which are samples basically. And the way to do that is zone. We can either load them up individually by just going new zone, add in a new instrument, new sample, or we can go to load multiple samples and it will dump them all in together. Now, if we hit new zone, it's quite straightforward. It will just load a new zone. We hit the arrow here and load a new sample and we find it. If we go to multiple samples, we get a whole new window where we can find our samples. It's just a standard folder finder menu, and you just go through and find your samples. So that's just, all I'm going to do is just add a couple of samples in. Let's add a kick. Maybe that kick, we just add an 808 kick. As you see, as I hit enter or OK, it just comes down here. Let's add a hi-hat. Let's add a couple of snares maybe. What's in miscellaneous sounds? Nope. That might be good. Right, so I just added 4 samples there just to keep it simple. Once you've done that, just hit done. And this menu comes up. So now you get a couple of options when you're adding in multiple samples at a time. So you've got auto map at the top. So if you had, say for example, it wasn't percussion, it was more of an actual instrument, you'd gone out and you recorded a couple of like notes from an instrument, and you wanted to put that into an EXS, so you can actually start playing it within Logic as its own instrument. If you named each sample with the actual note location, so for example, if you was maybe going for a violin and that violin was playing a C2, then it played an E2, a G2, etc., then you might find yourself, it'd be easier for you to just number and label each individual sample, and then when you hit auto map, it will find out where the notes are and it will automatically place them notes there. So that's quite a good one if you're creating a massive instrument and you've labeled all your samples correctly. Drums, so that's zone without range, root key from audio file. So this is just basically, it will just put them in place. It'll be just like the one hit and standard input, or you can choose a very similar way, but you get to choose where it starts and how many zones it runs through. So we could have, for example, our 4 drums starting at C1 and running over 2 zones, which is 2 zone notes. So it will run over a tone rather than a semitone. But we're just going to stick with start at C1 and each zone's 1 semitone or 1 note. So we hit OK. As you can see, down here you can see where the samples are gone, and also here you can see what notes, so their root note. So let's just go through the kick to start with, and we can go through all of these and as many of these as we can and show you what they're doing. So this is your root key, your root pitch. So at C1, the kick is playing its normal pitch. And we've got some fine tune edits here if we wanted it to be a bit louder, the panning. We've got also, if we put this with our pitch, just to make it a bit easier, there's very similar type edits. We might want a velocity range where it only plays between a certain velocity. So we can do that. You've got the key range. So the key range here is, because we can have the sampler affect its pitch. So for example, that's only playing between C1 and C1. Its root key is C1. So when you hit C1, it'll play just a normal pitch. But if the lowest range was, say, C0, let's take it all the way down to C0, we've got a whole octave there of that sample. Now, as long as pitch is ticked, the sample will be influenced by pitch. You can see as we go down, it changes in pitch. Now, if you take it off, it'll just be the same pitch. So that's what that does, and that's your key range there. One shot is very, very useful for drums. If you hit the sample once on the keyboard or pad, whatever you're using, it will finish the whole sample. Where if you have it off, for example, and it doesn't finish the sample, and you can, especially with drums, you can get that horrible little click. So for drums, one shot on, I would say, I would suggest. If you're playing an actual instrument and you've got like one shot held notes, then you might want to turn that off and play around with the envelopes, which we'll talk about in a minute. Reverse does what it says on the tin. If you check it and hit the sample, it'll play in reverse. You've got, let's go back to output because we missed that. This is what we was talking about at the beginning of the tutorial. These are our outputs. So it was 5 stereo, so main, which is 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They're stereo outputs. Now we've got the rest here are mono. So I'm just going to stick with the mono ones, and I'm going to have kick on 11, for example, the hi-hat on 12. I'm just going to go down. You might want to put this in different order. Snare on 13, and maybe put the other hi-hat back on 13 as well. So we've got 12, I mean, sorry. So we've got 2 hi-hats there on 12, and a snare on 13, and a kick on 11. So we'll come back to that later on, just remember those numbers. What you've also got is a sample start and end. So you might have a bit of dead air at the beginning of one of your samples that you forgot to cut out, or it's come with a little bit at the beginning that you don't want. You can have that sample start at a certain point. As soon as you hit the key, it will start there rather than at the beginning of the audio file. And the same with the end. Here, if you turn loop on and you hit where you want the start of the loop and the end of the loop to be, when you hold the note down, it will loop between those two notes. Between those 2 points, I mean, sorry. So that's quite good if you've got, say, for example, a held string sound, and it's quite short, but you want to, say, for example, your sample's 2 seconds long and you wanted to hold that note down for 5 seconds, you could maybe have a part in the middle of that held note that you can loop loop around, and you'll be able to hold out the sample a lot longer. It's pretty good, but it's quite fiddly. You have to get the exact start and end points so it doesn't sound too dodgy. You've got a crossfade option here to fade in and out between the start and the end point, so it doesn't sound too funny, and some tuning, etc. there. Right. So now we've got our four samples. They're all in there, and if we played them, right, they're just there. It's great. So what we can do now is if we hit the cross, it will ask us to save, and we can save this actual instrument. Now, if we hit save, it usually goes to your default sampler instrument, where you can see I've got quite a few random weird ones saved. They're a bit unorganized, but you can save what we want. And for this tutorial, we'll just call it ML tutorial kit 01, and we'll save that there. Save him, and as you can see right there, it's ML tutorial kit 1. And for example, if I opened up another project later on down the line, we can come in here and we can find where we saved it, which is bang on the top here, as you can see, ML tutorial kit 1. We can just click on it and it will load that back up, what we just saved, which is great. It's great if you start making your own kits and your own instruments. It's great. So now, as I said, we can come in here, and if we played, we can start tuning the instruments up within here as well. So what we've got, transpose, this is where you need to be careful. It will actually be MIDI transpose, not as in pitch. So if I'm playing, say I put my snare there on D1, if I transpose that by 2 semitones, it'll play the kick. Yeah, so it's not actually transposing the pitch. This is what you need to be wary of. Tuning, it will actually tune the pitch down. So just be wary of that. You've also got a glide, which you obviously won't use in drums, but you could potentially use it with if you're creating an instrument. Again, like, we can go through these in another tutorial with an actual instrument that's actually in the EXS, and it'll be a lot easier to explain. Here I'm just showing you how to load in drums, and now we're going to start putting them out to different channels. So now as we did earlier, we've created these and we've put them in different outputs. So what we can do now, as you can see, this is only one channel. If we come into our mixer, there's a little plus, which when we've got a multiple output, we can open up this instrument into multiple channels, so we can start manipulating individual channels. So if I hit plus numerous times, just till it won't go anymore, as you can see, so this is the main, this is 1 and 2, then we've got 3 and 4, 5 and 6, 7 and 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, let's just close this for a minute so you can see, 14, 15, 16. So now, if you remember, we put our kicks on 11, so let's just name them. We put our hi-hats on 12, and we put a snare on 13, so we can remember. Now, if I play these, you'll see kicks. When I play the kick, it's coming in on 11, hi-hats, snare, sorry, coming in on 13, and the hi-hats on 12. Now what we can do is these are now on separate channels. So now what we can do is add our own compressor to our kick. So we can do whatever compressor settings. Let's do something that's really elaborate, and so you can hear that it's not affecting the other instrument. So there's our kick, heavily compressed, but our hi-hat, our snare's not. Now this is great, I think, because for me it keeps everything quite tidy and quite neat. It keeps the same kits together, but you can go in and you can start changing volume on certain instruments, panning on certain instruments, and samples, and start sending effects and inserts, and also EQing each individual group of instrument samples that wherever you put them on the output is perfect for me. So that can be a lot of fun. And that's a very, very good way of how I load my drums in, make them multi-output so I can manipulate each individual channel. Okay, I hope that helps with creating some drum kits and how to import samples into EXS. Yeah, thank you for listening and watching.